Jesus, after spending time with many people, this is before the passage, he spent many time with people. He was healing them, he was praying, preaching and teaching. And as we've heard, he retreats to a high place to reflect, to meditate, to pray and to gather his energy. He sends the disciples on their way ahead of him, and they get into their boat and begin their journey to the other shore. And Jesus would meet them after he had rested. The disciples and the boat began to move across the lake. Now, they must have been on a high from the great gathering prior to all this, a gathering that they'd obviously witnessed. People came from nearby villages to hear Jesus and literally to be touched by him, spiritually and physically. And it was the end of a fine day. So while comfortable in the beginning as they set sail, the winds picked up and began to move the boat in ways that frightened the disciples. And it must have been frightening because they, being experienced fishermen, most of them, to frighten an experienced fisherman, it must have been one storm that was gathering. The sails of the boat were stretched, the waves even began to come over the sides of the boat. A storm had happened. They were, as I've already pointed out, fishermen, and they knew when to become alarmed when such a storm brewed. And Jesus sees that they are far away from the shore and begins to walk to them. Already in a worked up state, frantic, that sight scares them. It's a ghost, they cry. They were afraid, doubly afraid, I suppose, the storm gathering and trying to do everything they could do to make the boat safe, and then seeing what they thought was a ghost. And Jesus tries to calm them by identifying himself. It's early in the morning, and he knows their fear. Peter, the disciple who we know is constantly over the top with and about Jesus, recognizes him and asks to meet him, or shouts to meet him, I would think, with the noise that was going on. "Tell me to come to you on the water," Peter says. And Jesus says, "Come." Peter trusts Jesus and leaves the boat to meet him. He's doing the unthinkable. He's also walking on water towards Jesus. And Peter has laser vision straight on Jesus, locked on Jesus. Then what happened? The wind picks up again. Peter can hear the wind howling. He can hear the waves slashing and smashing against the side of the boat. And he stumbles. He becomes worried. And he looks away from Jesus. And then he begins to sink. He begins to panic. He knows he's in trouble. Many, many, many years ago, it would have been 1971 actually, I was in St. Ives in Cornwall with two mates. And on one of the beaches, Porthminster Beach, there was a raft about 100 metres from the shore. And there were red flags out on the beach, which obviously means do not go swimming. And, being three lads, 18 years old, whatever it is, you ignore warnings like that, don't you, at tea time. And so we went in the water and swam towards the raft. And these two friends of mine were better swimmers than me, and they got to the raft first. I managed to get there about, 15 minutes after them. And as soon as I got there, the cheeky sods dived in and decided to get back to the shore again. So I thought, right, push back off the raft and head for shore. And the waves were getting stronger and stronger and stronger. I was getting weaker and weaker and weaker. And then one of the waves just pulled me right down, and I did a kind of a somersault underneath the water. And I was panicking. I knew I was in trouble. I didn't know whether I'd get up again or not. And then suddenly I just thought, let's try and stand. So I managed to try and right myself and stand, and luckily the water just came to here. And so I managed to walk the rest of the way to the beach. But for about the next hour or so, I was in shock. I was shaking and everything. But I managed to get out. And my friends couldn't care less. But anyway, that's another story. Life, as we know, can be like a harsh wind, blowing and buffeting us back and forth. Circumstances in our life can cause us to flounder, to panic, to drown, figuratively and literally. In those times, we want to keep our eyes on Jesus and do the impossible. But these circumstances of life interfere and insert themselves between Jesus and us. So, have you ever felt, hands up, have you ever felt if you were out of control, drowning, going under for the third time? I know I have, literally and figuratively. Are you drowning in debt? Are you drowning in a relationship that saps your energy? Are you in despair and depression? When will this pandemic ever have an end? Have you received an unwelcome medical diagnosis? What are the waves that confront you every day? How's your relationship at home, at work, with your children, with your family, with your partner? Are you so swamped by the circumstances of your life that you can't breathe? Jesus speaks to us in those times. Don't be afraid. Take courage. I am still here. And then Jesus also asks us, why do you doubt? Why do we doubt? Well, doubt is the default position, I think, for most of us. We allow things and circumstances to distance us from the care of God. We allow the worries of the day to become so overwhelming that we lose sight of our Creator, God. Sometimes we feel like God is an illusion, a ghost. We are human. We will always have doubts. However, Jesus never doubts us. Jesus is there for us even when we feel as though we're overwhelmed. From the very beginning of the story, Jesus moves towards his disciples. He moves towards them when they're struggling at sea on the boat, frantically pulling this lever, pulling that lever, pulling the sails in, doing whatever to make the boat safe. He moves towards them. He moves towards them when they decide, even when that might be a menacing ghost coming towards them. He moves towards them when they're terrified by his approach. He moves towards them when they're reckless enough to set a dare. Call me and I'll come to you. He moves towards them when they begin to drown. He moves towards them when they ask for help. He moves towards them when they're shivering and sorry for their rashness. He moves towards them when they realize, for a beautiful, flickering instant, who he is and what he is. He moves towards them when they worship him. In other words, Jesus never stops moving towards the ones he loves. He never stops crossing the dark water to come where we are. Neither our fearfulness nor our faithlessness ever alters his steady approach. We are the ones that he's bound for. Our flailing bodies are the ones he pulls out of the water. Ours is the boat into which he climbs. It is for us that he calls out across the terrifying waves again and again and again and again. Take courage. It is I. Do not be afraid.